So, I've begun receiving some feedback on a few of my videos, and I'm starting to get the impression that many out there are starting to see me as not but a nickety-prickety, capable of only generating negativity and spewing poorly constructed cynicism. This is not so. I assure you all, I am eminently capable of being positive. And what better way to display this positivity than a recent blast from the past for me that I had the pleasure of revisiting. The Suffering: Prison is Hell is an action horror title. It also has the billing of a survival game, but it isn't really. It's the first game in the Suffering line, and the second to last game Surreal Software put out. Ostensibly, The Suffering is a third-person shooter, yet it has a fully functional first-person mode that you can go through the whole game with. You can switch back and forth between the two perspectives on the go at any time. It's pretty cool and nifty with its uses here and there. Yet, I do mostly find it as more of a novelty since... you're being negative already, Dusk. Positive thoughts. Positive thoughts. Anyways, I have fond memories of this game, yet have not played it for years. Well over a decade now. Has it stood the test of time, or is as great as my jaded senses remember? Well, let's find out together. We assume the role of ethnically questionable Torque, who's been sent to imaginary Abbott State Penitentiary, on imaginary Carney Island, situated off the coast of imaginary Maryland. Oh wait, that one is actually a real place. I think. Anyhow, Torque gets put into death row, having been sentenced to death for the murder of his wife and 2 sons, a crime he either did do, didn't do, or only partially committed. It's kinda hard to explain exactly what's going on here right off the bat, so bear with me a bit. No sooner does Torque get tossed in a can, does shit start to hit the fan. Your fellow death rowians start to get killed off one by one, until you're all that's left, and a mysterious force breaks you out. Outside, you find death all around you, as people are getting slaughtered in gruesome fashion by an unseen force, raising hell on the island. Now, thus far, it may seem that the Suffering is fairly one note, and heavily overdoing said note, with its gratuitous displays of carnage. In truth, the Suffering does a lot to set its tone and atmosphere, and it does it rather well. Unexplainable events and hallucinations of his dead family plague Torque, while creepy and sinister voices whisper to him from the shadows. As he comes to confront the face of evil itself. Which kinda looks like that one creepy scene from Pulp Fiction. Well, alright, perhaps the Suffering doesn't exactly put its best foot forward. What were retroactively dubbed the malefactors begin flooding forth from the island itself, assailing Torque and the rest of humanity and even each other from here on out, sometimes in constant, seemingly unending ways. Something I thoroughly enjoyed was learning about the different malefactor types, as each has their own origin theme, which finds its genesis in dark and gritty backgrounds. As we come to learn that each is an incarnation of some manner of past atrocity. Well, wait a tick. Incarnation. Incarnate. Carnate Island? As an evil incarnate? Oh, I see now what you did there. After all these years. The wonders of an adult brain. The gameplay I find gratifying and satisfying to this day. Exploding malefactors and tactically utilizing resources to gain the advantage in pit situations to come out through without a scratch. It's the stuff. The enemies themselves are highly varied in appearance and behavior. You have to change your tactics depending on what you're finding and how many of them there are. The Suffering also touts the so-called insanity meter that fills up as you kill. Once filled, it allows Torque to beast out, so to speak, transforming into a monster himself. It's a pretty visceral experience and fun to do after you get a feel of when to apply it for the maximum usage. It's not an auto-win mechanic. Powerful, yes, but Torque remains as vulnerable as he was before. It must be said that the creature form has its fair share of problems. I don't exactly like how... Positivity, Duskshroud. Positivity. You know what? Let's just move on. As this is a horror game, there is the prerequisite flashlight, which also has you collecting batteries to operate. There are some dark places here and there, but you don't really need it. Its inclusion actually seems rather token, though you can't stun some mobs with it if you shine it right in their faces. Finally, health is fairly standard. Torque can take a fair bit of punishment before dropping, though most of the malefactors have multiple attacks which can take a large chunk out of you if you're not careful. Which is why there is a rather generous health system that lets you stack 9 healing Zobium bottles. Or is it Zombium? I don't know, whatever. The game's not all about combat. There are some puzzles here and there, a few of which are even kind of clever. Most mere road bumps along the way, if even that.
Has the devil trapped you? You're not a bad man. You have to believe.
Whoa, that almost took a whole 4 seconds. All in all, the suffering's pretty much perfect. It's a very solid game. A real nice experience. It's just, in my humble opinion, it just might not be all it can be. Just bear with me a moment. However different the malefactors are, there's not exactly a whole lot of them. You more or less fight the same 3 ones for much of the game, with the remainder popping in every now and then. The more interesting and difficult ones don't show up until near the end, and even then they're placed sparingly or by themselves. Also, I find the weapons a bit lacking. There's not that many of them, and of the limited arsenal you have, there's really only 2 you'll be using most of the time. The Tommy gun and the shotgun. The revolvers are the only other real main weapon, but they just don't cut it. It takes forever to kill even the weakest mob, and the one thing they offer over the other weapons, pinpoint accuracy, just never needs to be capitalized on. It's fun taking out things with a barrage of headshots here and there, yet the opposition really racks up quite sharply, not even that long into the game, while the revolver's practicality plummets. Other than that, you have 2 melee weapons. A shiv, because it's a prison, of course. Then a fire axe, which is actually good, if situational. One interesting thing I found out not too long ago was that both of the melee weapons actually have a second attack triggered by jumping. The shiv has this bizarre drop-down slash, and the axe has an awkward chop. There's no real use for either of them. It's ridiculously hard to hit anything. And even if you do, the attacks aren't any more effective than just hacking away as normal. It's just left me scratching my head as to why either of these are in the game. There's 4 different kinds of grenades. Well, 5 if you want to be technical. 2 utility ones, flares, which are completely useless, flashbangs, which are actually really good. 3 different kinds of explosives, which, other than a slight difference in damage, are practically identical. I suppose you can say the Molotovs has a bit of added functionality against the Festers if used at the right time, but that's it. Finally, there's the interior flamethrower, which is nowhere near as cool as it should have been. It's a novelty armament. I mean, you will kill anything one-on-one with the damn thing, but it's just so tedious to use. All it really does is stun lock something while you slowly kill it. So you have to keep...
thoughts, Dusk. Positive thoughts.
You know, on second thought, maybe more monsters and having to worry about a whole arsenal of weapons just weighs the game down with needless guff. It's all about perspective, you know? Alright, now for my favorite part, the narrative. There's 2 stories running together. The main one being, and really Torque's only concern, of just getting off the island, with a lot of strangeness going down along the way. Torque goes from simply trying to contact the outside world for help to being the unwitting patient of a deranged doctor. freeing the damned soul of an oxorocidal murderer, and finally, well, the executioner you're just trying to kill, so not too much out of the ordinary for that. Although he is an undead toxic gas spirit, so points for that. The second is the tale of Torque's family, and how their deaths ultimately came about, which is determined by the player. The two plots come to a head together at the end, being resolved in tandem based upon what choices Torque makes up until then. But more on that in a bit. Now, The Suffering is a tale of personal struggle. The thing is, Torque's a silent protagonist, a bit of a peculiar choice considering the sheer amount of internal and external forces acting on him. Torque does show some signs of character here and there, but not during any situations where it would developmentally matter. However, this does have the benefit of leaving the player free to feel the full weight of what happens in their own terms. Understand, though, that along with the player character's reticence, most other characters have no idea what the hell is going on and tend to last a scant few minutes before dying off and pissing off. As such, the game's not left with much room for exposition. So, how precisely does The Suffering make for an engaging narrative? Well, Surreal Software did a few things. Firstly, they made the only real characters undead apparitions. Go figure. There's the nominally lying Dr. Killjoy, whom has decided for reasons known only to himself to help Torque out with his inner demons, that the island apparently wants. There's the former executioner of Abbott, the homicidal Hermes Hate, who sees in Torque a kindred spirit, and so tests and competes with Torque in a game of murder across the island, while the resigned and defeated Horace Gage sympathizes with Torque, knowing what fate awaits him on the island, as it was his own, yet sees in Torque a way out for himself. That's some pretty heavy stuff. The three of them show up from time to time, offering insights into themselves, what's happening on the island to some extent, if in a vague manner, as none of them truly understand much about it either. It's revealed that Torque was the catalyst that caused the island to awaken, but how and why remains a mystery. Now once more, as Torque doesn't talk, and no one is really around to offer much in the way of exposition, the narrative is instead cemented together by the aforementioned visions and hallucinations. It's rather intuitively done. There's 3 different flavors of these. As Torque makes his way through empty, blood-soaked prison halls, abandoned, dilapidated catacombs, and haunted woods, he will have supernatural experiences, sightings of the dead, and glimpses into the past of a dark happening or critical event occurring decades or even centuries ago on the island.
Inmate, what are they doing?
Pocket full of roses, ashes, ashes, we all fall down!
Incarnate itself is the source of the trouble and is likely the player's main interest, if not the protagonist, yet it's always kept a mysterious presence. You never find out what it is or anything about it, really. We do, however, get to see firsthand what it's done, what its maligned influence has wrought upon the world, through these visions Torque has. Many of them are related to how a particular malefactor was born, or how certain people were twisted and corrupted. Also tying into this are the scrapbooks. Clem's book details the malefactors themselves, and provides insight into their nature, while Consuela's examines and explains the island's various locations, both of which provide critical context to the visions Torque has. I really like how this was all done. It's fun and interesting to learn about the monsters and the locales across Carnate, some of which are hidden and must be sought out. Same thing with some of the visions. Maybe not the most organic of storytelling, yet I feel it works perfectly.
What is this shit? Inquest, court-martial. God damn it. Those fuckers will never get me.
The visions are also solely responsible for carrying the other side of the narrative of Torque's family, Carmen, his wife, and 2 sons, Corey and Malcolm, whom all haunt him across Carnate.
When are you gonna let me out?
You never were my dad. Not really.
This is what drives the second story. For the most part, Torque's family will visit him to either spur him on through the nightmare, or just to say hi and offer a half-hearted middle ground. This is when the morality system starts to come into play. Over the course of the game, you can choose to help others out you come across, leave them to their own fate, or kill them yourself if you feel so inclined, which nets you the obvious good, neutral, and evil alignments. The spirits of your family act differently towards you depending on what choices or actions you take. Now, some of these... what's the word I'm looking for? Visitations?
But she's not in visitation. Well, I don't feel in visitation.
Invisitations. Thank you there, mate. Some of these invisitations can be quite unnerving, perhaps even pitiable for the mute Torque.
Daddy, help me, Daddy. It's so dark in here. What's going on, Daddy? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I won't do it again. No, Daddy. Daddy, no! I don't want to see it. No, Daddy, no!
Something to bear in mind is that in spite of the obvious netherworldly shit going down, it's actually not exactly clear if it is indeed Torque's family visiting him from the beyond. I'll explore this in full in the video to come, as it's a lot better to examine it looking back. Wink wink. Finally, we have the phones. By no means a big or integral element, but I appreciate them. Occasionally, you'll come across a telephone which inexplicably starts buzzing. However, instead of a telemarketer on the line, it's a dead guy. About half the time, it's one of Torque's family members bedaddering him for one reason or another, but there will be others that want to tell you their own life story too.
Yeah, they ain't all bad. Oh, baby. It just drives me nuts thinking about you out there in the world without me to keep you safe.
Not all of them ring, and a few other phones are hidden, so it's a little rewarding to find them all. Granted, some of the calls don't necessarily contribute to the game's atmosphere in an adequate fashion.
Birds just don't go around attacking people without no reason.
I know, right? I didn't understand Birdemic either. There's 4 key narrative events, boss fights of a sort against the undead guys, and some weird-ass thing at the end. These battles are a bit different from the running and gunning Torque's been doing all game, as none of them can be engaged directly. Honestly, they're almost more like boss puzzles. Killjoy is the first to be fought, after you have solved his little murder mystery mansion, and is confronted in his operating room. Daintily, he runs around the room bringing dead slayers back to life, constantly, until the film projectors sustaining him are destroyed. Some can just be shot at, others have to be dealt with in an indirect manner. After his form has been dissipated, he rebukes Torques a bit, then offers him the powers of rebirth. I have no idea what this thing is or what it even is supposed to do. It's never explained, just accept it for what it is. Anyways, Torque uses the blue fireball thingy on his creature self, which is just hanging out in the room for some reason, which then turns back into Torque, again for some reason, and then does that. I guess it's an allegory for Torque reaching within himself to confront and come to terms with his dark side. After that, anyhow, the Suffering goes into 5th gear at this point, zooming through the rest of the story. Torque makes his way back into Abbott in short order, but gets trapped. Horace, the lightning dead guy, helps Torque out of the pickle he's in, telling him to meet him back in Death Row.
This place wants you, Torque. It needs people like you. Once it gets a hold of you, it won't let you go, like it hasn't let me go. I've been here a damn long time, and it's sucked me dry. I pray it's almost done with me. It's sending something after you. It let you out for a bit, now it wants you back, deep inside. Deep inside where I've been all these fucking years. Don't say I never did anything for you. Come join me in the dance hall.
Where the game started, and basically just ending up going in one big circle, which I never really liked, but oh well, minor quibble. Torque arrives in time to see Horace reliving his execution again, and a rather awkward boss fight commences. You'll be jumping a lot in this fight, in your evasion of creeping floor lightning. It is a challenging bit and a change of pace from all you've been doing up until this point, certainly more so from the rather weak sauce Killjoy fight. Yet the mechanics of this are just so clunky and never used in this manner beforehand. It's hard to gauge whether or not you'll clear the Nova while not ramming right into another environmental hazard. During the encounter, Horace tells Torque his story in between electrocutions, delving into his own psychosis and revealing more about himself and how the island got to him. The important bit to take away from this is his relationship with his wife and how that foils with Torque's own marriage. It's hard to appreciate without going over every detail and dialogue with this guy, but the synopsis is he was insanely in love with his wife, and the malevolence of the island used that to drive him insane, kill his wife, which got him killed, and has been draining him ever since. In the end, Torque blows up the last circuit breaker and throws the electrical chair switch off, with Horace thanking him.
Thank you.
Hermes shows up afterwards to muse on Horace's passing, and drop that his and Torque's encounter will be coming up shortly, which takes place in the shadow of a lighthouse that Torque now conveniently needs to get up and running in order to be rescued.
In here. Nothing can get in.
Nothing.
You say something?
Yes.
What was that? I think the dope's coming back.
Breathe deep.
That smell! What in the fuck's going on?
That always feels good.
The battle with Hermes is by far the most frustrating part of this game. What needs to be done is pretty straightforward. Block off the guy's vents to blow his ass into a conveniently placed furnace, then slam the door shut in his face. Yet it is so ridiculously hard to pull off. This fight dragged on for so long my first time through, I almost gave up to go look for any Prima guides I could find on how to beat this guy. I don't know, there might be something to it I just haven't figured out, but to me it seems like it's at complete random as to whether you're pulling off or not. And all the while, he's throwing his green balls at you. As with Horace, he says quite a lot during his encounter, so those interested in listening to what he has to say may wish to prolong the fight. Not that you really have much of a choice in that. Eventually, you do force him into the furnace and set it to well done. Maybe it wasn't the best idea to fight in the one place he could have been killed, but that's hindsight for you. Although it is implied he intentionally wanted to give Torque a chance to see who was the better killer. Last order of business is to get the lighthouse running, then head down to the dock below to the Coast Guard for pickup. On the way, Torque's progress is impeded at various points, but the gang all returns to lend a helping hand. I understand and get that Horace could have still been around and wanted to help. But Hermes? I'm pretty sure I just smoked his ass.
So, you still need some help. In the lighthouse, you showed me just how good.
Killjoy shows up too as the penultimate encounter, after a long absence, to tell Torque he's placed his thingamajigger on the wharf for him. Don't know how he did it, but I'm sure science was probably involved somewhere. The doctor informs Torque it's time to face what's inside him before he can move on, and what has to be at this point the most complicated procedure to get a guy's head out of his ass. The final confrontation is where the family side of the story comes to a head. Torque sees each member of his family one final time who respond in accordance to Torque's morality, either coming to terms with him, offering that half-hearted middle ground, or telling him to piss off. The youngest of his sons, Malcolm, is the first to speak. I may be completely off on this, but I believe each of the family members are to represent some aspect of the psyche, Malcolm being innocence and or innocence lost, Corey, regret and remorse, while Carmen, the wife, perseverance and acceptance, with a dash of sympathy. Though what exactly any of that means or relates to Torque is up in the air as, well, he's not really much of a character on his own and doesn't react to anything. It's probably just how it all comes across, as without a player avatar to buffer the emphatic reactions, they all almost seem like direct attacks on the player's own sensibilities. Whether that's cheap or deep is for you to decide. As an example, no matter your morality, Malcolm's part is to tug at the heartstrings, to then fade away. Following that, in a rather dramatically symbolic fashion, Torque's creature sight inexplicably reveals itself. As has been foreshadowed, the final battle is you fighting yourself, with Torque's creature sight being the first on the menu. Now, upon first starting this fight, you might think, if not desire, to creature up yourself. Go toe-to-toe in an epic duel with the monster. I mean, there's never-ending waves of respawning enemies all around, so you can keep your insanity meter full, that also uniquely counter Torque's creature form, making for a more challenging fight. There's also the little fact that you can pump shotgun shell after shotgun shell into this guy's face and seemingly have it do nothing at all. It's like the game's telling you to do this, right? Wrong. This is a mistake. You do damage to yourself if you engage the final boss in the same form as it, so you have to confront it as its opposite. I suppose this makes some more narrative sense if you really look at it. For the creature, you do indeed have to gun his ass down as Torque. It's just tanky as all hell compared to all that's come before. There's a mounted 50k that effectively puts this fight into easy mode, as the creature can't get to you up there, but if you don't use it, get comfy, as you'll be there a bit. If you do drop the SOB without it, give yourself a hug, I guess. You've earned it. Next, Corey shows up. Overfloweth with angst. Remorse for blaming his father for their deaths if you're a goody two-shoes. Regret at having Torque for his father, which led to their deaths if you're bad to the bone. Or more remorse for the murder-suicide he came to the reasonable conclusion of executing if you're too scared to get off that fence. I'm truncating a lot here, though I assure you, the neutral ending is kind of watery. It centers around Corey more, obviously, yet I always found it a bit off, half-baked even. It gets explained more and developed a bit further later, though I must say, it ends more like a Law & Order episode. Seriously, I thought it may have been something from another game or the like. I will say that the reason he did do it is rather dumb. Corey then emos off while the creature rises up again, though this time it transforms into evil Torque, which I must say looks pretty silly. I understand that there's a supernatural element to this series, but come on, he looks like a younger version of Darth Sion. Now you do get to go creature mode and let loose. Can't say there's anything to this phase, because there isn't anything to this phase. Your doppelganger keels over and dies in like 2 seconds. Anticlimactic, if possibly cathartically satisfying. Once his ass is grass, Carmen finally shows up and speaks her mind. Torque takes a few tentative steps to be with his wife one final time, before shit starts to go down, as the island makes one final attempt to break Torque, in what has to be the greatest moment in this game. Behold, evil itself made manifest. Just look at this guy. It's like a Final Fantasy boss stitched together with a Silent Hill boss. Let's break this design down, shall we? It has a Stygian black barbed wire halo, wing-like tendril protrusions, which shoot fireballs, of course, a mechanical heart deal going on, hooks and chains in its flesh, most of which are anchoring it to the island itself, and the very best part, a little deformed mini-me-esque Torque dangling on him from an umbilical cord. It actually says that. The game clarifies that that's supposed to be an umbilicus.
May sound, this creature appears to have a miniature version of Torque attached to him via a long umbilicus.
This is what is known as Torque's hatred. I can't say that this climactic encounter is exactly all that hard. Its melee strikes do cover half of the dock, though there's no reason for you to really stray that close to it. It does employ some supernatural BS to pull you right in front of it for some cheap-ass punches, but that's about it. The fireballs it launches your way require evasion, or it can be made to hit any intervening obstacle with some mindful positioning. But other than that, as long as you keep a logical distance, it can't really hit you all that much. But that's just survival. Attacking, well, the problem there is that you can only harm it in turn with the rebirth power. It's that blue fireball thingy, which has to hit its heart directly at that. You only have a limited amount of times you can throw one before you have to go recharge up. However, the device is only powered for a few seconds at a time. This is the instance where you're in danger, where it can catch you out of position, especially if hatred happens to be on the side of the dock the device is on. I don't know if there's supposed to be 3 of them or not. There's one on each side of the dock that you have to kill, and it doesn't come back on that side. At first I was thinking maybe it had something to do with Torque's family members, one for each, you know. Though, it's more likely it has something to do with the engine, with what they wanted to do with this fight. With the final strike upon its black heart, the beast falls back into the abyss which spawned it. As you've indubitably guessed, there are 3 different endings based upon your morality. Short versions is that for the good ending, Torque was completely innocent and was set up by some bloke named the Colonel. The neutral ending sees Torque killing his wife on accident. He blacks out in a fit of rage or something. Upon witnessing this, Corey arrives to the logical conclusion of drowning his little brother in the bathtub before promptly throwing himself out of a window. I mean, who wouldn't do that? Either one is just Torque tripping out and killing them all. He gets off the island in the good and neutral endings, with the specifics being a little different. There's also a closing dialogue from Carmen to T, which reflects her morality as a little bit of falling action. The evil ending sees Torque giving in to the island, I guess, or at least his dark side, after having just cut himself free of it, kicking some poor bastard shit in spectacular fashion to then run back into the woods of Carnate. But it's all good. And it's a good game. I played it mostly on the Xbox, got the PC version a bit later. I wanted to see if there was any difference between the two like there were in Doom 3. The PC suffering had a few quirks to it then. A hater would call such things bugs. And to this day, it still has them. There's a few other things I thought about going over, but like the bugs, they're so much irrelevant blemishes, not even worth discussing really. It's not really healthy to get caught up on such minutia. Positivity is the name of the game. No stinking thinking here any longer. Now, the tale of Torque doesn't end here. There's another The Suffering out there that's soon to come. So please, beautiful friends, return once more to see the conclusion of Torque's tale and the ties that bind. With such a flawless foundation, all a sequel can conceivably do is improve upon the formula, taking it to exciting new heights. It'll be great. Promise.